Hello, dear friends. All current news are focused on the G7 summit, which in my opinion is a plan by the richest country to impose their will on the rest of the world. Opinion piece. G7 against China. A plan to counter China's advance. It presents an alternative to the Silk Road. G7 rivals China with infrastructure plan. Targets Latin America, the Caribbean, Africa and the Indo-Pacific. Designs a uniform recovery that avoids the failures of the last crisis. G7 backs Biden's proposal for a 15% global minimum tax. Greenpeace criticizes Boris Johnson's proposed G7 reconstruction plan. Putin wants that the relationship with US has deteriorated to its lowest point. Let's start. G7 rivals China with big infrastructure plan. The group of seven's richest countries on Saturday sought to counter China's growing influence by offering developing nations an infrastructure plan that could rival President Xi Jinping's multi-billion-dollar Belt and Road Initiative. The G7 has launched an infrastructure plan in developing countries to address China's influence. It will target nations in Latin America, the Caribbean, Africa, and the Indo-Pacific. President Biden has combined the other G7 leaders meeting at a summit in Cardiff Bay, UK, to launch a major infrastructure plan to counter China's advance. In this regard, the G7 leaders agreed Saturday to launch the Build Back Better for the World initiative to respond to tremendous infrastructure needs in low and middle-income countries, the White House said in a statement. The plan is intended as an alternative to the Chinese project to revitalize the Silk Road throughout China's One Belt, One Road project, which aims to revitalize the so-called Silk Road by modernizing infrastructure and telecommunications to improve connectivity between Asia and Europe. G7 reaches consensus on human rights. G7 leaders have reached consensus on the need for a shared approach to China selling exports at unfairly low prices and on human rights abuses, a senior Biden administration official said Saturday. G7 to design a uniform recovery to avoid the failures of the last crisis. One of the main economic objectives set by the G7 leaders at their summit in Cornwall, UK, is to design a strategy that allows for a uniform recovery and avoids the failures committed after the 2008 recession. The leaders of the world's most developed democracies devoted the first plenary session of the meeting on Friday to plans to rebuild a better world once the health crisis that has gripped the planet for more than a year has been overcome. G7 leaders agree to support Biden's proposal for a 15% global minimum tax. G7 leaders agreed to support the US President's proposal for a 15% global minimum tax, White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said. Greenpeace criticizes Johnson's proposed rebuilding plan to G7. The environmental organization Greenpeace on Saturday strongly criticized the Build Back Better for the World plan that British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has submitted to the G7 countries for approval today, Sunday. The G20 economy returns to pre-crisis level. The combined gross domestic product of the group of 20 countries returned to its pre-crisis level in the first quarter of this year, according to a report by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. China begins construction of the world's largest liquefied natural gas storage unit. China National Offshore Oil Corporation will expand the capacities of its liquefied natural gas storage facility, and once completed, the Jiangxi Binhai Port Industrial Park in China's Jiangsu province will become the world's largest storage site in the world for liquefied gas. China's high-tech greenhouse boom on Chongming Island outside Shanghai, China's most populous city, workers pick and pack tomatoes and cucumbers in a glass greenhouse operated by Dutch company Food Ventures, which harvested its first batch of produce at the site in May. Russia. Putin warns that his relationship with US has deteriorated to its lowest point in recent years, in his opinion. Russian President Vladimir Putin gave an exclusive interview to NBC News on Friday, in which warned that his bilateral relationship with the US, in quotes, has deteriorated to its lowest point in recent years. The President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, gave an exclusive interview to NBC News on Friday, in which he warned that his bilateral relations, this is a repetition of the translator, excuse me. The Soviet collapse taught the Russians the danger of being messianic superpower. Biden makes it clear that the US hasn't learned its lesson, writes Paul Robinson, a professor at the University of Ottawa, Canada. The Russians, in other words, seek to reconcile everyone, while Westerns believe their own ideals are universal and seek to spread them far and wide. Crypto coins. Risk of cryptocurrencies. The independence of bitcoins from central banks and the lack of an economic base under it are the main risks for this cryptocurrency, according to Dmitry Pankin, the former deputy minister of the Russian Ministry of Finance. The banker reminded that digital currencies have only the mechanism of records and trust in a computer algorithm, in quotes, and no one can guarantee that tomorrow there will not be a new parallel Bitcoin, a mirror system that will devalue the existing one, he explained. He added that there are a large number of unpredictable dangers in both the stock market as well as in the foreign exchange market, and at the same time he considers too early to have fun with cryptocurrencies, he said. Bitcoin is bad for crime. The Justice Department on Monday was able to recover the equivalent of $2.3 million in Bitcoin extorted from Colonial Pipeline from the ransom paid in cryptocurrencies during the cyber attack launched in May against major pipeline operator Colonial Pipeline, hinting that digital currencies are not always going to be a perfect tool for criminals. Bitcoin divides Salvadorans between opportunity and fear of losing their money. The possibility of using Bitcoin for trade buying medicine or paying bills in El Salvador is seen by some as an opportunity to even make a profit. Others, however, fear losing their money in a transaction. A Bitcoin at $200,000 by the end of the year. Some traders see it possible. After reaching an all-time high for nearly $65,000 in April, the price of the cryptocurrency has fallen and now appears to be consolidating below $40,000. Some Bitcoin options traders are betting on a rally in the cryptocurrency to a six-figure price by the end of the year, following last month's drop, reports CoinDesk. According to data from the Laevitas platform on the Deribit cryptocurrency options market on Thursday, there were a total of 425 Bitcoin call option contracts for $200,000 and with an expiration date on December 31st. This is a price that is approximately 5 times the current level. Other assets. Gold continues to consolidate. Gold markets have fallen a bit over the course of the week, but remain somewhat elevated. After all, we have broken above a major downtrend line, and it certainly looks like the hammer from the previous week is trying to hold overall. Because of this, I think it is only a matter of time before buyers come in and try to support this market, but I recognize that the $1,850 level simply must hold. Silver gains ground despite a stronger dollar. Currently, silver is trying to get above resistance of $28.3, while the dollar is gaining ground against a broad basket of currencies. Copper against inflation. Copper, which has experienced a bullish rally in recent months that has taken its price to new all-time highs, is one of the best performing commodities in this environment. Brent price rises above $73 per barrel for the first time since May 2019. Brent crude oil prices rose above $73 per barrel for the first time in more than 2 years, according to stock market data. The bond market is acting strange as a sign of economic slowdown. Yields follow a perverse script, falling as inflation rises, that suggests an economic slowdown ahead. Europe's riskier bond markets just got a boost from the ECB. European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde gave investors the green light to buy some of the region's highest yielding government bonds over the next few months. Blue bonds, a source of financing for Ibero-America. American countries have enormous potential for blue bonds, a new financial instrument related to oceans of water, given their biodiversity and the great economy needs they face to face the crisis, said James Craven, manager of BitInvest. Taxes. Billionaires don't pay taxes while workers don't get raises. The big takeaway from last week's business news is that secretly released documents show that billionaires are not paying their fair share in taxes. And meanwhile, hotels, restaurants, and other businesses can't find enough people to work as maids and dishwashers, and so on. Here is now the richest manage to pay less in taxes than the poor. An investigation using Secret Internal Revenue Service data revealed that the nation's wealthiest pay little to almost nothing in income taxes. Thus, Warren Buffett has shown to have paid only 0.1% of his new wealth, and both Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos have paid no more than 3.27%. The crisis increases child labor. The loss of jobs and working hours in many families in the year of the health crisis of the closure of schools have contributed to the spread of child labor, which traps 160 million children in the world, a figure that distances the goal of eradicating it by 2025. Small Danish company soars on the US stock market, and no one knows why. Denmark's small biotech company Orphathime surprised investors and analysts when its depository shares soared 1.387% overnight on Wall Street on Thursday. United States. Trump administration seized metadata from Apple on Democratic congressmen. The Justice Department under the presidency of Donald Trump required and seized metadata from the Apple company on Democratic congressmen and their work and personal environments in order to investigate leaks to the press about Russia. The New York Times reported. Biden restores $929 million for California high-speed rail held up by Trump. The Biden administration on Thursday night restored a $929 million California high-speed rail grant that then President Trump revoked in 2019. Cartels at Mexico border. FBI Director Christopher Wray said Friday at a hearing with lawmakers that his agency noticed a fair number of cases of individuals deeply indebted to Mexican organizations among those illegally entering the country, adding that there is no question that cartel activity is spilling over at the border. U.S. keeps a close eye on Iran's warship in the Atlantic. The Department of Defense is closely monitoring the movements of two Iranian warships that are sailing in the Atlantic Ocean, marking the first time the Persian country's navy has sailed in these waters. Grassley would be temporary president of the U.S. Senator Grassley, as president of the Senate, would be the transitional president when the vote audit comes out and until the rest is resolved. Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution provides for such a case, Rafa Barr reports. McDonald's potatoes are grown on Bill Gates' land. Potatoes used in the fast food network's restaurants are grown on farmland owned by the Gates family, according to recent data compiled by NBC News. McDonald's gets hacked. McDonald's announced Friday that hackers have made off with some data from its systems in several markets, adding the restaurant chain to the list of major companies victimized by recent cyber attacks, although in this case there have been no major consequences. Analysis. We are entering a period in history of no growth, according to James Howard Cansteller of Cansteller.com. The problem we have now, especially because of the central bank's shenanigans, is that we are entering a period in history of no growth, says in quotes the expert, after explaining that this will affect the ability to deal with the debts that are accumulating. He points out that the financial economy has been detached from the real economy for some time, which generally means that the dollar will end up in the bad way, something that is already evident, for example, with the increase in the prices of automobiles and consumer goods in a supermarket. In this context, Cansteller acknowledges that rebuilding a real economy is going to be an Herculean task, but it will probably be a necessity, like it or not. When we live in an economy and a society that is under such tremendous level of stress and that generates a tremendous level of anxiety and uncertainty, society will end up responding by doing crazy things, he concludes in quotes. Europe. Big investors welcome to the ECB's continued shield. Fund managers and investment bankers welcome the extension of monetary stimulus, but look for clues about the future. One more quarter of calm. This is how major investors assess Thursday's decision of the European Central Bank to extend the accelerated pace of debt purchases, known as the Emergency Purchase Program, until the end of September. France mobilizes for oil spill near Corsica Island. French authorities mobilized on Saturday for an oil spill on the high seas off the coast of Corsica, although the slick was moving away from the island by nightfall. The slick was located about 10 kilometers off the eastern part of Corsica. Two National Navy ships equipped with anti-pollution equipment and specialized personnel headed from the Corsican coast from their base in Toulon in southern France. Afghans jailed in Greece over Moria migrant camp fire. 4 Afghan asylum seekers were sentenced to 10 years in prison in Greece on Saturday for their part in a fire that destroyed the Moria migrant camp last year, in a case that highlighted Europe's chronic refugee problem at its borders. Spain. New European ID card that stores your fingerprints and your photo in a microchip. The new ID card is written in Spanish and English. In addition, you will be able to leave it at home thanks to a mobile application prepared by the government. It is the first DNA whose physical card you will not have to carry at all times. With a microchip written in Spanish and English, and much more difficult to forge than its predecessors. The government will give aid to young people who accept job offers considered unattended. The government, within the framework of the Youth Guarantee Plus plan, will give aid for the travel expenses of young people who accept job offers in occupations considered unattended. Spanish debt continues to rise with a record 1.4 trillion in the first quarter. Spanish public debt continued to rise in the first months of 2021 to close the first quarter at a new all-time high of almost 1.4 trillion euros, 125.3% of GDP, according to data released Friday by the Bank of Spain. Public debt has been breaking records quarter after quarter since the beginning of the crisis, which has led to both an increase in healthcare and social benefits spending and an erosion of tax revenues. The result of the fisheries agreement between the European Union and the United Kingdom is very good for Spain, stressed the Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food, Luis Planas. The camouflaged sale of tomatoes from Western Sahara can ruin Spanish farmers. An investigation reveals that agricultural companies controlled by the King of Morocco export Sahrawi tomatoes as Moroccan, in contravention of trade agreements with the European Union and its legislation. The study indicates that the plantations help to legitimize the occupation of the territory. Spanish farmers foresee the ruin of the sector. U.S. expressed to Spain its commitment to a regular and safe immigration. The Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, expressed this Friday to the Spanish Foreign Minister Arantxa González Laya its commitment to safe and orderly immigration throughout regular channels. A short film launches a message of freedom to students from the prison of Almería. A group of inmates of the penitentiary center El Acebuche of Almería have made a short film in which they narrate in first person their experiences and launch a message of freedom so that young students do not make their mistakes and end up behind bars. It is the value of freedom, an audiovisual in whose design, direction, editing, camera, music and interpretation have participated students of the Center for Continuing Education, Retomar, which trains these prisoners from the modules of the prison of Almería. The Americas. The collapse of neoliberal globalism in Latin America from Mexico to Peru. Latin America exhibits a dynamic of the collapse of the imposed decalogue of the Washington Consensus that is reflected in the revolts of the millennials in Chile and Colombia, two bastions of neoliberal globalism, and in the elections in Mexico and Peru, where the sovereignists triumphed against the globalists. Cuba asked tourists not to bring dollars. Cuba has asked tourists not to bring dollars to the Caribbean island, as the US currency will no longer be accepted in the country, according to the first vice-president of the central bank, Francisco Mayobre Lence. The Cuban government has announced that it will temporarily stop accepting cash bank deposits in dollars. It blamed tighter US sanctions that are restricting its ability to use the dollar abroad. Bolsonaro authorizes return of military to Amazon to combat lodging. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro authorized the return of the armed forces to the Amazon to help combat environmental crimes in the world's largest rainforest. His Vice President Army Reserve General Hamilton Mourão announced Friday. Euthanasia reaches Spain and Latin America. Peru decriminalized euthanasia for one person in February. Spain legalized this practice in March of this year, and in April a bill was passed in Chile. Meanwhile, there are only 7 countries in the world where euthanasia is legal. Increase in emergency services due to neglected diseases. Within a year and a half, emergency services will see a drastic increase in the care of patients with diseases such as myocardial infarction and cerebral vascular disease due to the lack of follow-up and diagnosis as a result of the health crisis. Curing cancer with protons. Argentina's futuristic health. The Argentine Proton Therapy Center will be the first of its kind in South America and is being built in the national capital by the National Atomic Energy Commission, the highly complex technology company, INVAP, and the University of Buenos Aires. The technological devices for complex radiosurgery look like components of a space shuttle. A cyberknife robotic arm, a Versa HD linear particle accelerator, and a Proteus Plus cyclotron which directs high-energy protons and minimizes adverse effects on the healthy tissues and organs. Peru's Fujimori leads protests to annul votes as Castillo moves closer to winning. Peruvian president candidate Keiko Fujimori, who is likely to lose a runoff of a socialist rival, led a protest in Lima on Saturday, again calling for the annulment of votes that didn't favor her. 822 mothers await justice in Bolivia. Every year, 40,000 complaints of violence against women are registered, but most of them are not attended. Law 348 of feminicide in Bolivia establishes sentences of 30 years for the mothers of women, who, however, find legal loopholes to avoid prison. Cuban composer Tania León wins the 2021 Pulitzer Prize in Music. Cuban composer Tania León, who lives in the US, won the 2021 Pulitzer Prize in Music for her work Stride, premiered in February 2020 at the Lincoln Center in New York. Curious news or bizarre news. There is a day in which 99% of the world's population receives sunlight at the same time. July 8th at 11:15 UTC. In Spain would be 13:15. On that day, at that time, and according to the map shown, 99.164% of the world population has sunlight. How is that possible? Basically, because at that time the night occupies almost the entire vast Pacific Ocean, and because of the low concentration of population in the inhabited areas where it is night at that time that day. Trip to space with Jeff Bezos sold for $28 million. An identified bidder paid $28 million at auction Saturday to accompany Jeff Bezos and his brother on Blue Origin's first named space flight next month. Asteroid worth thousands of times the value of the global economy could be a pile of rubble. Asteroid 16, whose value exceeds the entire global economy by thousands of times due to the potential value of its resources, may actually be a pile of rubble, according to estimates in a new study published in the Planetary Science Journal. And that's all for today. Thanks a lot, dear friends.